woof,
Seattle studio in person.
Woof, woof.
Although you can't see us. I know you wish you could. Bark, bark. Thank you for joining. I am Ariana Backer and here with...
Larry Backer, and we've got a very exciting program today.
We do. We are talking about climate change reparations.
No, do not use that term.
Well, this is a term that people have been using.
No, not people have been using. That's the problem with the discourse of today.
The people have been using.
No.
So what are you calling it?
There are three different terms, and they're all politically charged. And depending on what term you use, you will be, at least among the people who are involved in this, you're either going to be shaping narrative by the choice of the term you use, or you're going to be signaling what your political affiliations are.
Okay, climate change, recompense.
No, there are three. There are three different approach. At least three. I mean, there's probably 1,000, but there's three. All right. Number one, developing states tend to call the process that we're about to talk about, and this is from the climate summit in Egypt. Right,
damages and losses.
No, they call it compensation.
Compensation, okay.
CSOs, civil society organizations, and especially politically motivated climate activists refer to it as reparations, which then bootstrap it onto the discussions for reparations of everything else from post-colonial exploitation to the slave trade, to gender disparities, to everything else. So it becomes a very politically charged term. The Americans and some of the OECD states insist, and this was an insistence that was the thing that broke the impasse that you're going to talk about in a minute. They insist on calling it loss and damage resources. So you've got three different terms, and you've got to be very careful, or you can be very careless. But when people listen to this, the words you use, unless you're using it ironically, the words you use will tend to situate you within a political spectrum, and then will
it will guide your listeners if you want, and if that's what you're.
We don't manage our listeners. We want you to think for yourselves. But anyway, so we're either looking at compensation, or we're looking at reparations, or we're looking at loss of damage resources for the deleterious effects of climate change
on developing countries.
Well, that's right, on developing countries.
Yeah.
That's right. And this is a huge story that broke on today on November 19th, when after decades and decades, the Americans finally relented, and among others, but it was essentially looking to the United States to acceded to being open to the to moving forward on the basis of developing, at least in part, this is going to be a complicated negotiation, but in part dealing with the development of a fund for or resources for losses that may be attributed to the effects of climate. There's a number of other things that are going on, but this was a huge deal.
Well, I mean, to be fair, it was the Chilean environment minister, Maisa Rojas, and Jennifer Morgan, the German special climate envoy, who I think engineered a last-minute deal to get the issue of what you call, you can call loss and damage, or...
Oh my God, my little activist puppy.
or compensation, or reparations, whatever you want to call it. The first time on the agenda in the United Nations Summit in 27.
Yeah, I would prefer to call it something like the equivalent of passing gas. That is, as a function of X happening, Y is going to happen, and Y is the transfer of resources. Usually everyone tends to like cash, but perhaps they'll accept credit cards, or actually they're going to accept a bunch of other things. That's what makes all of this complicated.
Yeah, it's really, that is one thing about it. It's odd to me that it actually doesn't quite compute for me that
Danger,
danger.
Will Robinson.
I know. I'm
You
getting into
can resist.
dangerous
All right.
territory
All right,
here.
so why doesn't it compute?
It doesn't compute because money for me doesn't equal a solution for climate change, the effects of climate change.
Very good, very good. And so that is another problem, and that's what's going to make this complicated. The way in which governments, private actors, other stakeholders have tended to view the process of management, whether it's public or private, has been radically transformed over the last 15 years. And you've really hit the nail on the head. We tend to now view the function and issue of governance in two quite distinct spheres. And they're grounded within this compliance-oriented notion of the responsibilities of the state and other powerful actors, which is rooted in principles of prevention, mitigation, and remedy. That itself implies that there are at least two functionally distinct objectives of the state or other actors with authority. The first, as you suggest, is a prevention element, which is either one that is viewed as administrative in character, that is, it's going to be based on rules that are issued by states or international actors, or private rules within like production chains or the like, or it's going to be driven by markets and market expectations with punishments for deviation. So you've got this administrative, bureaucratic thing that is meant to prevent. So how do we keep that? And part of what's going on in Egypt right now is indeed building these structures, building up from the Paris Accords, building up from actually a number of negotiations that have its genesis, at least in its current form, since 2007. And just as an aside, the idea of calling this reparations can be traced back at least back to 2009. So these are long conversations and they become very volatile. So that's one aspect, which is administrative, and you're not looking at money. What you're looking at is developing two kinds of things. One is administrative structures that are meant to make it possible for key actors to change their behaviors to prevent things from going on. Right, so you're developing the systems. And then two is that you're developing accountability mechanisms to make sure that those systems that you're creating, either through law or markets or whatever, that those systems work. So that's part one. But that isn't what is the big breakthrough here with compensation or reparation or resources available for loss. There, you're dealing with the other part, which is in the prevent, mitigate, and remedy. You're looking at the remedial part, which is, well, what happens when prevention is impossible, where mitigation limits the loss but still produces some kind of damage? Then what do you do? And at that point, of course, you need to deal with things that cannot be prevented or mitigated.
Well,
and that's where the money comes in.
Yeah, well, I mean, right, but how about you invest the money in sustainable solutions rather for
yeah, and that's
that
part,
population.
Well, but that's part of the deal. The fact that that you've now agreed to create a bucket o' money doesn't necessarily tell you anything about how the bucket o' money is going to be used.
Oh, no, I mean, a lot of these programs are designed like insurance policies.
But already, there you go. So already you're showing that there's going to be a wide variation and probably significant controversy in what the pot of money is going to be used. So,
you're exactly right.
Amazing. Oh my God, wait. This is a golden moment.
Actually, strike that from the record.
This is a golden moment.
Nothing like that.
Too late.
No.
All right. Develop your thought.
Well, all right. So when people claim some disaster.
Who are these people that you're talking about? These amorphous people. It's like pronouns. I have no idea who you're talking about.
Anyone in
like me?
in a country who is covered by said climate change policy,
Okay.
who has to then put in a claim.
But you've now jumped 4 steps or 5 steps or 1,000 steps,
I
depending on
have,
the
and I'm
country.
going to do
All
that
right.
because
All
that's
right.
how.
Well, yeah, yes and no.
Okay.
All right, so let's back up a second. So who's actually meeting in Egypt? States. And their retinues, their hangers-on, and other people who suck off of this enterprise and then who run around and to whom power is delegated or who may be influencers, the Kim Kardashians of the international sphere, privileged.
Are you suggesting that individuals should?
No, I'm suggesting that individuals are completely locked out of this
I
thing.
know.
Which is why your comment, it kind of makes my eyebrows raise, because indeed the only people who matter in Egypt are states. And the discussion about the creation of buckets of money and all of these things are discussions between states that set up mutual obligations among states. It is only as and when states, one, agree to this, 2, agree to the details about this. What does this all mean? Are we going to set up administrative systems, accountability systems? How are we going to deal with the bucket of money? Who's going to contribute to the bucket of money? Is it really money, or are we really talking about money equivalents like insurance or something else?
Is it going to be a one-time contribution? Are we going to continue to contribute?
And it is only, well, there's something to that as well, and there's a history to that, which is now almost 20 years old. But only when you get done with all of this, then and only then, right? So you're dealing with states basically feathering their own nests for their greater glory. This is their greater collective glory. And it's only at the end of the road when all of this is done that you can go ... Oh, yeah, and of course, all of this is really not suffered by the state, which is an abstraction. It's suffered by the people who happen to be citizens or residents of a state. And so at the very end of the train, the last station you get to is, to what extent will there be, and this is why the reparations thing just makes me crazy, because it's really the residual of a huge amount of other things that are going elsewhere, rather than to this thing, which is the people who are actually going to suffer, right?
Exactly.
And so for that purpose, what a lot of things need to happen. 1, you need these agreements. 2, states need to transpose these international agreements, whether they're international law or norms. They need to decide to transpose this into their domestic legal orders. 3, they have to agree that that transposition is possible, and on that basis will give individuals the right to make claims. And then 4, they're going to have to set up a system for doing it.
Bucket of money.
Well, or we could do what Jimmy Carter did and bring in a bunch of trucks full of cheese, and then everyone can have a bunch of cheese to make them feel better as they drown in the island nations that they live in, which no longer exist, right? And then they migrate somewhere. Right, but this is a problem. And so there are these narratives and trigger words that are being used, especially by press organs that love to play with hope and narratives that make it sound like, oh boy, the cheese truck is coming and we're all going to be saved. And by we, I mean the individuals who are supposed to be the source of sovereignty, when actually what is going on is this clubby thing among states and state actors, the aristocrats who tend to run this thing, whether they're informal, privatized, markets-driven aristocracies, as in liberal democracy, or whether they are publicly constituted vanguard parties of one sort or another in developing or in Marxist-Leninist states. At the end of the day, what you wind up having is these groups who then tend to manage these large collective organs, bargaining among themselves for the transfer of funds or economic power that they manage on behalf of their populations with respect to these things that may or may not be of interest. They'll certainly be of interest to the states, but may or may not translate very well down to the people who ultimately wind up bearing the effects of these things, the people whose houses are flooded out, the people who can't work, and the people who wind up having to pack and move.
That has always been the problem of aid.
Yeah. But so what? So we know that that's always been the problem of aid. Now that we give that as a given, now what do we do about it? And in this case, we've got we're back to where we normally are. Human beings, and especially international human beings, tend to be very simple creatures, and they tend to do the same thing over and over again, even if it is pathetically inefficient. I was going to use other terms, but that one will work. If they're pathetically inefficient, but they tend to serve the interests of those who happen to be in the managerial classes.
Okay, so then what next? Obviously, they need a framework and a process, but how is that going to happen?
Well, that's the problem. There's no what next, merely because you finally get the Americans to say, yeah, I guess we all need to contribute to this large vessel into which we will put pots o' money, which is my shorthand for economic or things or items or processes of economic value to aid someone else. That's just the beginning of a very long and complicated process. So, for example, one of the things that is now at issue is who gets to qualify as a developing country. And there's a huge, what is likely to be a huge debate, which then puts itself, aligns nicely with the continuing friction between the Americans and the Chinese.
China already believes that it's settled. Okay.
Right. Well, the Chinese can believe what they like, as the Americans can believe what they like. Reality, truth from facts. And here, truth from facts is if China's a developing country, then the United States may be one as well.
Well, we need to develop international definitions for what developing country is.
Politically impossible. But yes, we do. So one of the issues is, and this is what makes this both artificial and then at some point it makes people cynical. So the Chinese, for a variety of reasons, and that's another podcast, continue to take very seriously the idea, and it's built into it's built into the general program of the Chinese Communist Party Constitution. It's built into the structures, the political, economic structures and narratives of the Chinese state and political apparatus. And that is that given their march towards the establishment of a communist society in China, they are still in a developing stage. And so from their perspective, it's important for them to think of themselves as a developing country. And technically they are. If you measure this from the perspective of economic value or wealth, then the outcome is very different, and the Americans may have a point to say, well, you're not a developing country anymore. You claim to be an incredibly important international actor because of your wealth and power. So how can you possibly be a developing country and as well as having all of the privileges and responsibilities of a first world country?
And you want to eat it too?
But the answer is, of course, there's a disjunction here in the narratives and the basis for it. Depending on which lens you use to look at this, the arguments are plausible. But what that actually...
But you can't look through them both at the same time, and that's what's happening.
And that's what makes international politics so frustratingly bizarre. And so you've got people using words, similar words, they're built into those words are very different meanings from very different points of view, and which is why, merely because the Americans agreed to that we're going to go forward by creating this pot of money as part of a much larger set of negotiations about everything from mitigation, prevention, to remedial structures, doesn't mean that you're going to get anywhere other than the press organs of the globe are going to hail this. The CSO, civil society organizations, and activists are going to hail this as some kind of great transformation. But what's actually going to happen is this is the beginning of a very long process. So one of the problems is who gets to be a developing state and who does not. The second thing is, how does that translate into transfer of funds? And then the third thing that matters is, how does that translate into the responsibilities of each of these states with respect to the prevention aspect? So for example, in this case, again, you're looking at the BRICS. It's not just China, but it's China, Brazil, South Africa, India, are all saying, well, yeah, okay, we love this prevention stuff because indeed, and this is one of the big issues, we can't have climate average temperature go up above 1.5 degrees Celsius. And everyone says, yeah, wow, this is cool, but the Americans have been doing this since 1850. The Brits probably earlier, but they're now a small country. And so I'll tell you what, we're going to continue to spew all this junk out. Because we believe that it's going to be first in, first out, a FIFO method of prevention, administrative prevention. And so until the Americans actually go ahead and do this, that no one else is going to act. And of course, the Americans say, well, all that means is that we're now transferring all of the spewing that we were doing that we're not doing anymore. And now you guys get to do it. We don't do it, and we're going to incur costs. But you guys can continue doing this. But what happens to the net effect of this is that the people in Tonga are still going to be living 5 or 6 feet underwater. It's just that now you're going to feel good because it's a different set of actors that are spewing all this stuff, and not the progeny of what had been colonialist empires and then the Americans, which are always a kind of unique thing. So you've got all kinds of things going on here. You've got that. You've got the issue of what does it mean to be developing. And of course, none of this is going on in isolation. And I need to just mention this because almost immediately before this occurs in the Sinai, the Americans and the Chinese, along with key players in the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation area, adopted the Bangkok Goals on Biocircular Green Economies, in which they've been developing a framework for essentially in a much more precise framework for moving from economies grounded in waste to economies that are very sensitive to renewable sustainability, to cyclicity in the use of resources, and ultimately to a green economy. So things are going on in Sinai with respect to the climate change, but at the same time, it's important to note that simultaneously, there are all kinds of things going on within regional international organizations that may or may not have an impact of what's going on there as well. And so you've got what looks like a big story for like 15 seconds, and it is a big story, the idea of creating a fund, whatever we're going to use it for, insurance, subsidies, systems of rewards and punishments for appropriate behavior, delegating administrative tasks down to economic actors, imposing coherence and coordination among state actors with respect to all kinds of things, using national courts and national litigation, tort, and other legal systems for the purpose of getting remediation, damages to individuals. All of that stuff is now in this big stew pot, this ecology of legalities.
And you're missing the name of this pot. They're calling it Global Shield.
Oh my God, this is like a Marvel cartoon. Is this like the League of Justice?
The Justice League.
The Justice League.
Did you really just do that?
Yeah, my God, yes. The agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. We've got Captain America. We've got all of the characters here. So yeah, and I guess the bureaucrats who invent this stuff are either just some of the most subtle and funny people on earth, or are so clueless to some of the riffs that Gen Z people certainly will pick up on, that they may become their own parody before this thing actually develops out. But having said that, I still think this is from my own personal view, I think this is a great step forward, not because it may produce anything soon. We've been down this road before. The developed states, not including China, well, no, including China. I can't remember, but about 10 or 15 years ago, also agreed to pledge. They pledged a bunch of money over the course of time to help remediate some of the effects of climate change. And that has had a kind of pathetic history.
Yeah, my thought is not just investing in sustainable. I mean, actually helping advance their technology, helping with, actually helping the developing countries move faster into the future toward climate.
Very good. And that is exactly, for example, one of the items in the Bangkok goals on the biocircular green economy that was just adopted, even as people are dithering around in the Sinai. Everyone coming in on their private planes, helping contribute to their carbon footprints, but we won't go there. I mean, if Prince Harry and Meghan can do it, these bureaucrats can do it too.
What is that? I mean, what?
There's technology transfer, tech transfers and the like is part of the Bangkok goals are somewhat more complicated. I've posted it to my blog, the text of the biocircular green economy, if you want to look at it in some detail. This stuff, once you get granular, this stuff gets very complicated, because if you look at this actually and you take a deep breath, we're not really talking about a bucket of money. We're not really talking about, oh my God, we're going to now institutionalize some coordinated global prevention, mitigation, and remedial strategy. We're not going to create quote unquote international law, which is all CSOs want. They love this legal signaling, which makes me crazy. And that is itself the triumph. It's not all of that. When you look at this, and you put this all together, what you're really seeing, and this is what makes this really interesting and to some extent gives me hope, you're looking at a concerted and conscious effort to significantly transform the basis on which humans conduct key activities that are central to the enjoyment of human collective existence on Earth. We are transforming the way in which we think, assuming this actually becomes successful. And even if it's partially successful, there'll be a transformation.
You know what would be even better?
Oh no, Santa Claus.
If we made those, if we took time to think.
Who's this we?
If the people, if you're talking about the same we that I am.
Oh no, I've been hurdled. All right, so we, whoever this we is.
Before making decisions that cause irreparable damage.
Too late. You mean more irreparable damage?
More irreparable damage. Thinking about how to do it differently. And helping the other developing nations do the same. Right.
But then we have a key issue. And this is a key issue that no one is foregrounding because it's a hard issue. And that is when you look at things like climate change, when you look at things like biocircular green economy, when you look at the necessary changes, and believe me, by no means am I suggesting that this is a bad thing. I think this is a great thing. It's just that you can't work your way to success by sloganeering and having people who have pieces of paper put in front of them to read to sound heroic. That's not the method you're going to do this. But when you look at all of this, right, and you start working on this, there are two different fundamental choices that you have to that you have to select between. One of them, and you really touched on it here. One of them is the view that the role of the state, stakeholders, and private actors is to view the nature of human activities on Earth as one that ought to strive for a net zero effect on the environment. That is, that when one looks at the Earth and its functioning, one should be able to make human activity on it invisible, right? So it's net zero. And at its most advanced or most extreme, I hate using the term extreme, that in fact you can then turn human collectives as agents for returning. It's a kind of reactionary thing, returning to a state before damage began. All right.
Right.
So that's
Socially responsible decisions.
That's
making.
one. No, this isn't socially responsible. This is an absolute obligation to go to net zero, whatever the cost in human welfare or human living conditions,
I mean,
and
aren't
go
humans
back.
social? Isn't that, I mean, environmentally and human
Well, but
and social?
those words will have different meaning. But
Okay.
and this is why. All right. So that's
Lawyer.
one way of embracing the first principles around which you build all this stuff. The other one is that we accept the likelihood and necessity of human effects on the earth and its ecologies by the very nature of humans forming part of the earth and human ecologies, that no matter what you do, there can never be a net zero, that humans will affect, and by that effect, sometimes adversely affect the earth, its ecologies, its biodiversity, and the lot, and that the object of all of this effort is to make choices about and to develop a sense of limitations for the amount of damage or change that human collectives are willing to tolerate, and then to develop mechanisms for remediating or compensating where those events occur. And what appears to be happening in both in Bali, which was where the Asia Pacific was it in Bali, in Thailand, where the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation leaders were meeting, or in the Sinai, there appears to be some movement towards the second form of basic principles. That is, we understand that there's going to be damage. We're willing to live with it. To some extent, we're going to put constraints on it. And then because we know this is going to happen, we're going to develop a pot of money or a pot of resources to then mitigate. At the same time, when you're looking at the language and rhetoric of climate change, you're looking at something, the other side, which is far more absolutist, that we have to do everything in our power to go to net zero or net negative, and that the only thing, the only responsibility is to actually roll the environmental clock back. And the dissonance between the two is likely to impede a rational approach, a comprehensive, rational approach to the problem. But anyway, this is all very interesting, and that's all I got to say. Woof, woof.
Bark, bark.
Stay tuned. There's lots more coming.
There's absolutely more. So take a break, come back, and join us. We'll see you next time.
Bye.